You think you should out gay students to their homophobic parents?
I think it's every right for a parent to know what's going on with their children under the age of 18. I don't have a lot of trust in the teachers. You know, not that I didn't trust them to teach my kids. I was just more worried about the transgender issue. But the thing that kind of scared me was like, we're gonna come for your kids, you know? And I was like, not my kids. I'm raising 2 little boys. I know they're little boys, you know?
Why wouldn't you support reducing childhood abuse?
Because it's about respect for the parents. Because that is my child. Being a woman is very hard. Your first period, I got my first period at my boyfriend's birthday party when I was 12. It was the most embarrassing thing in my life. Because abortion is too big of an issue to make it black or white. And that's how I feel about transness.
That's not what the laws are.
Well, there are some in California where, like, if you misgender your child, they can take you away from your parent.
I live in California. What are you talking about?
I just heard it one time. I could be completely wrong.
Why would we say that there should be harsher qualifications for who's allowed to be a teacher comparative to who's allowed to be president of the United States?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of, Bill Clinton caught a blowjob in the office, the Oval Office, okay? So, nobody's perfect.
Sierra, so why did you vote for Donald Trump?
So I have 2 boys in school right now, and the whole education system kind of freaks me out a little bit, but it was for education mostly, public education specifically. I didn't have a lot of trust in the teachers. You know, not that I didn't trust them to teach my kids. I was just more worried about the transgender issue, I would say, mostly. And it's not because I have a problem with transgenderism people. I just my fear was like, I want them to respect me as a parent, to be able to talk to me. And I personally kind of grew up when the trans thing was a big thing. It was coming to, I was like 2018, 2016, I was on the internet a lot. And, I remember it becoming a big thing, and I remember I was a huge supporter of it. And, but the thing that kind of scared me was like, we're going to come for your kids, And I was like, not my kids. I'm raising 2 little boys. I know they're little boys, And it's like, I'm not saying that people who feel things at a young age, shouldn't have, understanding of it. But I didn't want teachers to be able to, socially transition my child without me knowing. Okay,
so what you're against is like social transition of children, right, without your consent as a parent?
Yes.
So you want parental consent over like how we particularly treat children. So for example, do you think
children.
Yeah, do you think the same thing should be true if the child's gay?
What do you mean?
Right, like should you have to be told as a parent that your child is gay if the people at the school know?
I would hope my child respects me and trusts me enough that he would tell me if he was gay.
But given that there are circumstances where it's not safe for kids to do that, right, and it is the case that their parents are very, very likely to hurt them, if it is the case that that's true, should they have to tell the parents?
Under the age of 18, they're living at their house. Are they going to be taking medicine? That transgenderism, a lot of people believe that it causes suicidal thoughts, so wouldn't it be fair for a mother to be able to talk to her child, even if she maybe doesn't agree? She should still have the right to know and be able to discuss those kind of things with her children. But if their school is doing it behind your back and you don't even know, how am I going to address my child if the school doesn't even tell me? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Like, I want to be able to have that conversation with my children. But if the school isn't telling me and they're secretly keeping it away from me, how am I going to be able to? That's my child. I wiped his butt, okay? I know him better than most people know him. And so, especially his teachers. So I want to be able to, have that knowledge. Yes, if my child is transitioning, I want to know why. Baby, what makes you feel like you're not a little boy? You know what I mean?
And although you'd like to have that conversation with your kid, and that's something that you'd have to determine at home, we have to acknowledge that there are people, right, that are parents, right, that don't have those types of intentions when dealing with their children. So when we're talking about like legal systems, we have to talk about how we can create them for all children that are going to be affected, for all adults that are going to be affected. And if we just look at it from the perspective of what it's going to be within your context, it would be hard to do that. Now, if you create an inclusive culture within your household, I think it's very likely that your kid will come up to you and will talk to you about those certain things, right? But given that it is the case that we have to address this from a legal perspective, why should it be mandated by the teacher to do that, given that it could put the kid at risk?
But that could kind of be said about, like, that's your child, though. The school doesn't have a right to keep a huge secret, like transitioning. That's a big, even if you're against.
You could say the same thing with being gay, right? Like, isn't that a quote-unquote huge secret to a lot of Christians?
Yeah.
So then why shouldn't they be forced to tell kids that they're gay? Tell parents that their kids are gay?
I still think, like, I mean, wouldn't, don't little girls and boys get in trouble at school for, making out? And so if a straight man and a straight girl, I'm sorry, a straight teenager, not man, a straight teenager and a straight teenage boy get in trouble for macking at school, would they tell the parents, this was inappropriate, this was PDA? So if they were gay, would they do the same thing?
Does that happen at your school or something? Like, I mean, there were kids that kissed at my school when I was a kid. Like, I had done that when I was a kid. I didn't get in trouble for that.
Get, like, written up if they were doing it in a certain area. You're not supposed to be making out and when you're out.
So there's a difference between making out and having a sexuality, right? Or being trans. Because making out.
That's a huge decision to not be made with a parent under the age of 12 and
How's that any different than being gay? Like, for example, like, why is it the case that you should be mandated?
Because being gay doesn't physically transition your body. It doesn't change your hormones. Being gay is what.
Neither does socially transitioning. Social transitioning doesn't do that either.
It affects some things. It's going to affect your perspective on things. Yeah.
What's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with that. But if it's happening, you need to tell the parent.
Why?
Because they're okay.
Because it can put them at risk. Like, anything that could put the kid at risk.
School if my child has all their vaccinations? Why do I have to tell the school my child's social security number? Why do I have to tell the school
it harms other children?
How much money I make? Why do I have to tell the school, where
I don't
live?
think you have to tell them how much money you have to make. You do?
Put in your income bracket, yes sir. At a lot of public schools.
At a lot of public schools, that'd be like state district associated. That wouldn't be federal government, right?
So if I have to tell the school everything about me, where I live, who's in the home with the child, I have to tell the school that.
Does that put the child at risk, given that you did that?
Well, I think it's supposed to be not putting the child at risk. They want to know, right? So they know where that child's coming from. And so I want the same from the school. I want the school to respect me and tell me what's going on at the school. I don't want my child to get in a fight at school, much less, if say, for instance, my son...
They're getting harmed there. Like, do you see the distinction between they're getting harmed versus they're not getting harmed by being trans or socially transitioning?
Transitioning is harmful, and I respect that. I do.
How is it harmful? To socially transition, like,
if you don't fully understand what you're doing, and let me tell you something. You were 12 once, I was 12 once. We were all 4 or 5 once.
And I never wanted to do that.
I didn't never want to do it either.
Because we're not trans.
I remember being, you said, we got to keep everybody away from at risk. Okay, there's so many things from risk. There's a risk from the night, at home, with your parents. There's a risk on the school bus with the bullies. There's a risk at the school with teachers. And there's a risk at the school, with everything. There's risk everywhere.
But we want to mitigate that risk. We want to mitigate that harm.
You can mitigate it, and I understand that, but you need to have respect for a parent. I raised that child. At the end of the day, that is my child. You're not being honest with me.
What?
If you're keeping a secret from me.
That's fine. Wait, again, you think that's totally okay when they're gay, right?
No.
Okay, so then you should be.
Okay, so what's going on with their child?
Okay, so you think that you should out gay students to their homophobic parents?
Transgenderism has been.
Wait, can you respond to that question real quick?
Okay,
you think you should out gay students to their homophobic parents that might abuse them?
I think it's every right for a parent to know what's going on with their children under the age of 18. I don't think it's right. I mean, children get abused for anything.
But that that if you do engage in this type of behavior or you allow this in schools, it will increase domestic abuse towards children. Given that you know that it will increase domestic abuse towards children and it's easily preventable given engaging in the type of behavior that I'm referencing, why wouldn't you support reducing childhood abuse?
Because it's about respect for the parents. Because that is my child. I don't think you quite understand. I am responsible for my children. That is the one thing in this earth that I have, is that I birthed something. I am responsible for it. And I put my trust in the school system to help make sure my child is okay every day. Now, I understand where you're coming from. It is such an unfortunate truth that there are people in this world who are homophobic, who are transphobic, and all of that. It's unfortunate. That does not take away the right of a parent. The person, I buy their food, I take care of them every night, I wash them, I feed them, I buy their supplies for school, I go to the PTA meetings. You're telling me I would go to all of this and you're not going to have the common decency to tell me my child is possibly transgender, which comes with a risk of suicide? You think that's okay? What if you didn't even know if I'm homophobic or not? What if my child just says that? Because I'm going to tell you something. Children will say things all the time. That's what they do. Like my son, he says things that aren't necessarily true. Yeah.
So like I would put the respect for parents and letting them know a little bit less than I would put like reducing childhood abuse. I care more about reducing childhood abuse than I care about the quote unquote respect that I'll be giving to parents.
That's your definition of abuse. You know, some people might think that luring a
Wait,
child
no,
in
no,
that
it
direction
no, I can actually
is
give you
abuse.
evidence that like it leads to more child abuse if it is the case that we.
What's that?
Yeah, I can provide you studies right now. Would you like me to provide you studies that indicate that if you tell their parents that they are specifically are trans or gay, that it would put them at a greater risk of harm?
Of like what? Physical abuse or just being told you can't transition?
Physical and emotional abuse.
Okay, so
Do you accept that?
physical abuse is terrible. But if somebody's getting physically abused, the schools will see bruises. They will call and okay. So if you're telling me a child is too afraid to tell their parents they're trans, but they're not afraid to tell the school that I'm getting peed.
So there could be different types of things in these types of circumstances that could risk that. For example, they might not tell the school that they are being assaulted or that they are being beat by their parents or that they're being emotionally abused by their parents because it could have been normalized by their parents as behavior within the context of that household. So again, if we look at the empirics, hold up.
Afraid to be transitioning.
What do you mean?
So if that's commonplace, which you just said, then why would they be? Then how would they?
Is it commonplace for kids to transition? Are kids stigmatized when they transition? Absolutely. Kids are unbelievably stigmatized for coming out. It's like for people to think that like it's a choice to be trans or like it's just something that people fall into. No, right? They go through incredible levels of stigmatization. If it is the case that they didn't want to go through that bigotry, they didn't want to go through that harm, and it was just a choice, they would choose out of that. But that's not a choice. It is not something that people just actively do. I didn't choose to be not trans. Right? You didn't choose to not be trans, right? That's just how we operate with the world.
I know that. I went through a very confusing stage in life. It's called puberty. It so sucks. Being a woman is very hard. Your first period, I got my first period at my boyfriend's birthday party when I was 12. It was the most embarrassing thing of my life. I would have done anything in that day to not have a period. So I think it should just be really, really, really smart that if you're going to do something as dramatic, and yes, it is dramatic. Changing your sex is a huge thing.
It's not changing sex. So when we're talking about being trans,
okay,
we're talking.
Gender.
So there's a difference between sex and gender.
Let me finish. I was saying something.
Okay.
So I forgot where I was going with this. Hold on. Let me carry this up. But listen, puberty, being a kid, it's hard enough as it is. It comes with all sorts of things. Being a teenager, it comes with all sorts of things. You will not be comfortable in your body most of the time. But we need to find a way to approach that topic in a way that helps people understand. Like, for instance, I might have voted for Trump, but I'm actually extremely pro-choice. And you want to know why? Because abortion is too big of an issue to make it black or white. And that's how I feel about transness. But you know what I feel about abortion is the most important thing, in my opinion, for a woman having an abortion is to be fully informed of what she is doing. And that's how I feel about transgenderism. How can anybody under the age of 18 fully transition if their parents aren't aware? How
We're talking about social transitioning.
Social or medical or anything.
What's wrong with social? Again, like when we're talking about social transitioning. Wait, can I please finish?
School, what about at home? So if it matters that much, if transitioning matters that much, you don't think it would be important for the parents to know so they could start doing it at home?
You understand that if they're bigoted, they wouldn't. Hold on, can I please finish? Am I able to finish? If they're bigoted, right, which is very possible within our society, very probable within our society for them to be bigoted, especially towards trans youth, that puts them at a higher risk of harm targeted towards the child. It sounds like you don't even care about that. Like, you're not even considering that. You consider only the effect on the parent. You don't consider the effect on the child, that they're at a greater likelihood of abuse. You're only considering that it quote-unquote disrespects you as a parent.
The other side, because on the same coin, I could say, how do you know that the parent isn't going to completely accept that? How do you know the parent isn't going to want research on that? I used to be against.
The kid would likely be able to tell them then.
Exactly. So
wait.
So
the
school hide
what are you
that
saying?
from them? The school is hiding that from them.
They wouldn't be hiding it from them if they already know and they already had a good enough relationship with their kid where they can talk about those types of things.
What if the child feels more comfortable doing it at school but not at home necessarily?
That's because likely the parents are bigoted.
No, I don't think the parents are bigoted. I think it's just a big secret. I mean, a big secret's hard to tell your parents.
The kid would have told the parents.
I had a hard time telling my parents when I had a crush on somebody, much less your gender. You don't think that's hard to talk to your parents about sometimes? but it's easy to talk to your teacher, or it's easy to talk to a student. That's why we need to let the teachers need to be able to talk to parents, not because the parents are going to be bigoted and hurt them. No, there are two sides to this story. You can't just say, oh, we got to keep it out because of the bigots. Well, what about the supportive parents who just want to know, but maybe the kid's too shy? And then that teacher calls them and she's like, I just want you to know, your son, he's come to me. He feels like he might be a girl. And I think it's important that we have this conversation. That's what I want. I don't want them to be legally held back from telling if my child transitioned. I'm not saying that, it has to be. I don't want a law on the books saying you have to tell. I want a law on the books saying I don't want a law on the books saying you can't tell. So
Wait, we don't even necessarily disagree then. Like, I thought you were originally arguing that you should mandate, like the school to tell teachers.
No.
Okay, well then if you disagree, then it doesn't sound like we were disagreeing.
I just don't think we should mandate hiding it from.
That's not what the laws are.
Well, there are some in California where, like, if you misgender your child, they can take you away from your parent.
I live in California. What are you talking about?
I just heard it one time. I could be completely wrong.
So, like, okay, there's also a lot of misinformation about what laws exist when it relates to people who are trans, right? I don't think it is the case that if you misgender your child that they get taken away from you. I really don't believe that there's a law on the books in California for that. But like, here's my question. You were talking about, like, how should we trust, how do we trust certain teachers with children, about how we should trust the parents more, right? I guess here'd be my question, right? It relates to the presidency, and I don't want you to see this as a gotcha. It genuinely is a question that I have because it's talking about the qualifications. Right? Would you let someone held civilly liable of a woman be a teacher?
Well, are we talking about Trump specifically, his case?
Not anyone specifically, just any person to be teacher.
No, well, obviously not.
So, like, why would we say that there should be harsher qualifications for who's allowed to be a teacher comparative to who's allowed to be president of the United States?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of, Bill Clinton caught a blowjob in the office, the Oval Office, okay? So, nobody's perfect, but that doesn't make them not a good president. And I'm not making excuses for people who say that's disgusting in all case and forms, but, every freaking day it feels like people who are famous or somebody comes out with an accusation, and it sucks and it's unfortunate. I hate it because I think that it's one of the worst things on the planet Earth, and it should be taken so freaking seriously, but it's just one of those things now where it's like, another one came out and said, and I hate that. It's taking away, power from, victims when they're able to say, you know what I mean? I hate that. So I'm gonna say, in that case with who was the lady, it was civilly recognized. He wasn't convicted of it.
He was held civilly liable in the context of a civil court, right, amongst a jury of 9 people. And again, that was something that we accepted if it was a teacher, that we wouldn't let them be a teacher. Or, for example, would you let someone legally immigrate to the country if they were held civilly liable of a woman, unanimously by a jury of 9 people?
Do you care? Because, if you voted, you support letting them all in unvetted, right?
Should be deported. Do you agree?
Uh-huh.
So then why should they be allowed to be president?
I can't give you that one. I'm sorry.
And you don't want violent criminals released in the country, right?
Nope.
How do you feel about Donald Trump pardoning people who pled guilty and admitted to violently assaulting police officers on January 6th?
I think January 6th is its own can of worms that are, I personally think he shouldn't have, pardoned the ones that were violent. I think they should have, but I also think, we throw the book at people for, so many other things. I don't think January 6th should have been a top priority.
You mean him undermining the integrity of our elections? We can go into that in a second, but you were saying
pardons, blanket pardons right before he walked out the door, Joe Biden, that was
no violent offenders, though.
But they could have done some really corrupt shit that could be investigated. And
Name one.
They won't be held. Fauci and COVID and hiding all that information, they would literally not let some things on YouTube.
That has nothing to do with pardoning that Biden engaged in. 1, 2, right? What crime did Fauci commit?
Community. And what?
What crime did Fauci commit?
I don't know, but he should be investigated. There was a lot of horrible things, he kept flip-flopping on things. Even if you want to go back all the way to
investigated for flip-flopping?
Yeah. Fauci's the reason that the AIDS.
You only get invested if there's a crime, right?
He used to tell people you could get AIDS from a cereal box. I cannot believe the left loved that.
Well, then that would be false, right?
Yeah, And it should be
Unless it is the case that there could be,
COVID.
unless it is the case that was be particularly contaminated with anything that could, right, get you
No, he was
to have it.
like you could get it from a water fountain. You should watch, the thing about
If there's
Fauci's
stuff in like the
disease.
water where it could transmit, that's possible. Like if you share
The
water,
water?
if you share water with
He
someone,
said you could get it off a cereal box.
if you share cereal with someone,
No, he said you could get it off the cereal box.
yeah, like if there's contamination where there'd be HIV within the context of the cereal.
Like someone sliced their hand and touched the cereal?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that possible?
He was talking like it was like the cold. You could get it from a water fountain and stuff. Like, that's how he was talking.
I really would be concerned with where you got that information, but do you think that the vaccines were effective?
I took the vaccines. And I never caught COVID until after I got vaccinated. So I wouldn't call it a vaccine. Maybe, whatever the hell the flu shot is every year is what I would consider.
What's a vaccine?
The vaccine would be from the polio.
No, but what is a vaccine?
It's like a little bit of the disease so your body can build immunity, right?
Well, not all vaccines operate that way. Now, with mRNA technology, we don't even have to use a virus in order to be able to do that, not even a dead one. We can just send the information directly to our body so that it can transmit information to be able to produce immunity.
I'm not against vaccines. I like vaccines. All my kids are fully vaccinated. I'm vaccinated. I like vaccines.
For sure, I'm just making sure because
Okay.
you brought up stuff with like Fauci.
I like vaccines. But no,
So I was just clarifying.
Don't like Fauci because, okay, so when COVID started, I worked at a damn mask factory. And 1 second it was, back orders because we had, he said, oh, we need the masks. And then he flipped it. No, we don't need the masks. Then he flipped it again. Like, I worked at this mask factory at the beginning of February of 2020. Like, it was crazy.
I think originally they said don't use masks because it was the case that we didn't have enough
Yeah.
PPE in order to be able to make sure that medical professionals
That's
had
not
access to
right
it.
then.
That was right, though.
We had plenty.
We didn't back then because there was a shortage because people were buying them at mass because there was a likely pandemic on the sunrise.
Okay. There wasn't like a shortage, but I literally worked
with
at
the-
the only, I was on,
Like
I was
objectively
on
speaking,
60 minutes.
objectively speaking, there was a mask shortage. Like that's a fact.
That's what they told you, yeah.
No, that's like factual. Like I can show you international evidence.
No, I agree with you. I will agree to disagree on that one. I worked at this mask factory, and I'm telling you, it was no shortage.
At your mask factory, I'm talking around the.
Around the world, yeah, but not in America.
Wait, okay, well, the entirety of the demand that we need doesn't just come from America, right?
Well, yeah, no.
So if there's a shortage worldwide, that hurts consumers in the United States, right? So that's why there was to be a distinction. That's why they said don't wear masks as much, because it was more important that medical professionals had PPE than average citizens.
Fair enough. But the reason that I truly didn't, I used to actually be a hardcore liberal. Probably would have loved you back in the day, which is why I like talking to you right now, because you remind me a lot of how I used to think, and I still feel that way. I still think that way. If you want to know the truth, like I voted for Trump, but I couldn't bring myself to vote for Ted Cruz. I don't like him. I think he's too conservative. I don't necessarily like the Republican Party. I think we need a lot of reform. I think we need to moderate on a lot, and I really appreciate the things you guys do. All of you, from like Bill Maher, Charlie Kirk, all of you are doing what we need to do, because what the truth is, I'm like I told you before we sat down, I'm not college educated. I don't know all this stuff. I don't know these things, but I can tell you, I feel a certain way, and I work where I work, and I see my community, and that's where my opinion forms. And I'm gonna tell you something. Under Joe Biden, my community got hurt. We were hurt with really high gas prices. We were hurt with just everything was really expensive. Housing. Oh my God, housing went through the roof in my community under Joe Biden. I don't know why. I couldn't tell you why, but
I have a degree in economics. Would you like me to explain? Yeah, so it wasn't caused by Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. If anything, Donald Trump's policy would have been more likely to lead to inflation, whether it be the more debt-related spending under Trump's administration, $8.4 trillion overall, $4.8 trillion non-COVID related, comparative to the Biden-Harris administration, $4.3 trillion overall, $2.2 trillion non-COVID related, according to the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget, which is a nonpartisan committee from the federal government. Secondly, it is the case that if we look at Donald Trump's tariffs, they do cause inflation. That's how there'd be a quote-unquote increase in domestic production.
I agree.
So they would have to cause prices to go up in order to be able to cause that. The only way we'll see prices go down with Donald Trump is if he causes a recession, which will mean that there's way more harm to the American public than there was gain in like the lower of prices, if that makes sense. Like it will be less affordable for people because GDP wages will go down.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense then. in my opinion. Sure. But
So then, like, why would we blame Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for inflation if they didn't do anything to cause it?
well, I mean, I don't have all of it off the top of my head. I'm sorry. I don't want to talk on inflation. Like I told you, I'm telling you. The community I was around, we were really affected by this. It was 4 years of like no more raises. I think that was the craziest thing. Like a lot of my friends and I worked for major companies. Under Trump, it felt like we were getting raises like every other month. And then I don't know what happened under Biden. The raises like really shriveled up.
So can I explain something? This is a common misconception. It's called the correlation causation fallacy. Just because two variables are associated doesn't mean one caused the other. Like just because it got worse under the president doesn't mean it was caused by the president. There could be various other factors, like the supply chain effects due to COVID, right, that are going to negatively impact conditions for workers. So that was a trend in the economy that was natural that would have occurred even if Trump were president.
See, but don't you feel like they were like really dragging their feet with COVID, especially after 2020? Like I felt like they could have opened up the country a lot faster than they did.
You could have said that they could have opened the country up a little bit faster than they did, but then also what are the concerns that we would have had there? Like more people would have died, right? Because it is the case that they wouldn't have been able to get access to the proper medicine. It is the case that the hospitals were overflown.
You say the hospitals are overcrowded, but when I went,
They were.
Well, not all of them, and then the ones that were, they would hold beds specifically for COVID patients. They did that at my hospital.
But they would the issue that was on a federal scale, and again, certain hospitals, that'd be true, they didn't get full. I'm talking on an overall scale. A lot of the hospitals in the country were overfilled. So if we're going to talk about a policy from a national perspective, it would make sense to do that. But we didn't even do it from a national perspective. We had state by state, right? State. So then why are we blaming the federal government for state policy?
Because I don't know. I guess there's no point in that. Why do they still ask Trump about abortion if we knocked it back to the states? I mean,
because he's the one who caused it to do that. He put people in the Supreme Court.
It was wrong for that?
Yes, because there are victims in plenty of states that can't get access to abortion now because Donald Trump left it to the states, right? And I don't think that should happen anywhere in this country. I think that should be a federally protected human right for women to get access to abortion if they were, or for girls to get access to abortion if they were. Yeah. And that does not exist in today's America because of Donald Trump.
In some places, yeah. Because we kicked it back to the states. Some states outlawed it, some states didn't. I'm telling you, I'm thinking that abortion, like at least the first 12 weeks, I could see that trending to being an 80-20 issue pretty soon. I don't see a lot of people not agreeing with the woman's right to choose as much anymore, at least in my area. Even older men.
Agree with the woman's right to choice.
Yeah. I think. See, here's what I think. I think if we all just took a really deep breath and stopped attacking each other and stopped making everything such a black and white issue, and we sat down more, I wish our senators and them would sit down more and discuss these things instead of having their viral moments where they yell at each other, and actually let's discuss a woman's right to choose. It should boil down to length of pregnancy, viability of it or whatever, and then of course financial situation. Social situation is possibly the most important benefactor behind abortion, and it's like that with, I feel like, on a lot of issues. It's funny, I sit here and I'm defending these trans rights. I don't agree with them, but I'm not going to tell a trans person they can't transition, and I think you asked me why. Well, you asked me what made me vote for Trump, and there's a lot of reasons, but the main thing I voted for is I feel like, and I'm seeing it from the right now too, so watch this, I voted for Trump 6 months ago, and then the Republican Party made me see a whole different side, but, I felt like the left was just becoming so unapproachable to even have these discussions. It's either my way or no way with them. It's either trans rights, abortion all the way, and it's I honestly voted for Trump because I didn't want to vote Democrat, because I'm lost friends because of politics, and I think that's insane. Politics shouldn't tear us apart anymore. This is ridiculous. It's getting crazy. I want to be able to sit here and talk with you and tell you, I don't freaking agree with you on a lot of things, but, we need to discuss these because, like you said, there are kids who get abused. But then that's why, we shouldn't tell that teacher, right? But there's kids that maybe we should tell the parent. Maybe that child is just really, really, really confused and really suicidal. Something's wrong, and they're trying to find the answers. But they need to talk. So, that's what I'm saying.